Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. This evening's edition will host Legislative Issues with Jim Parisi, where we bring the legislature into your living room. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field representative with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. As we normally do every year, at the beginning of the Rhode Island General Assembly session, we invite labor leaders to talk about their agendas for the 2016 session. And I'm pleased to have Emmanuel Falck with us today with the Service Employees Union. Emmanuel, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jim. It's good to be back. It's been a few years. I like the new set.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on In Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis. So.
Well, appreciate you feeling right at home with us. Emmanuel, why don't you start by letting our viewers know who's part of the Service Employees Union in Rhode Island?
So I work for SEIU, Service Employees International Union. I'm the director for the state council. We represent 4 locals. We're broken into 3 divisions, healthcare, property service, and public division, which in Rhode Island is state workers. We have about 6,000 members in the state, and we're part of an organization internationally in Canada, United States, and Puerto Rico that has close to 2.1 million members. And nationally, we're really focused on what's called the Fight for 15 and a union to bring up wages to at least $15 an hour to low-wage workers.
You mentioned property services. Is that custodians?
Yeah, custodians. So it's 32 BJ District 615. They represent custodians. A lot of business of the big companies downtown, Citizens Bank, they clean those buildings. We have janitors at the airport as well, TF Green. So, and they also organize security guards more in Massachusetts than here.
And I know in terms of healthcare, you have some nursing homes as well as some hospitals in the area.
So District 1199, which is part of the council, they represent about 3,000 healthcare workers. They also represent child care workers and workers in community health centers. We represent 7 nursing homes in Rhode Island, and we represent workers at Women Infants Beller Hospital and some of the community health centers as well.
So given the varied makeup of your membership, you must have a pretty wide-ranging legislative agenda. What are you and your organization going to be working on this year?
You know, we're going to work on what we always work on, which is to drive up wages for low-wage workers. This year with a specific focus on nursing home workers. We're falling behind, unfortunately, Massachusetts and Connecticut in terms of how much we pay these workers. These are workers that do God's work. It's very hard work. For some reason, our state over the last 15 to 20 years has created a model of long-term care where we pay dirt wages to these workers. These are workers that want to work. We should at least be paying them a living wage. So this year we're going to be focused strongly on legislation that would earmark funding that could only be used through the reimbursement system at the Department of Health and Human Services for direct care wages. Something was passed similar in Connecticut and Massachusetts last year. This tends to be a trend. It's really important for quality care that there be low staff turnover, and if wages continue to stagnate, we're going to see higher and higher turnover, which is going to hurt residents. The academic consensus is in low turnover equals high quality care. So we really need to, in order to stabilize the workforce and avoid a staffing shortage, we need to do this. I don't want to filibuster the conversation, but We had an issue in 2001 where there was a staffing shortage in nursing homes, and the state, as part of their budget in 2001, included something similar to what we're trying to do this year in order to bring up the wages. That was in 2001, so it's been about 15 years. We need to do that again. We're falling behind. When you have most of Rhode Islanders that can drive 20 to 25 minutes to Massachusetts, where nursing home workers are already making $1 to $1.25 an hour more and going up, we're not going to be able to attract and retain the best nursing home workers if we don't keep up.
So the Rhode Island AFL-CIO has worked on the minimum wage for all workers, and they've had some success. The minimum wage has gone up 4 straight years. It just went up to $9.60 this past January. Has that helped or not helped, the cause for your members in the nursing homes? I
think it's good anytime obviously you raise the minimum wage. It raises the floor a little bit, especially for the lowest wage. But it hasn't done enough, so we're really pushing to move towards a $15 minimum wage for everyone, but in Rhode Island specifically for frontline caregivers in long-term care and those that deal with adults with developmental disabilities. Our organization have been working on that issue for a long time, and we were happy that the governor did include some money targeted to increase wages for those workers that take care of adults with developmental disabilities.
That's right. She put in $2.5 million
right.
into her budget for just the salaries for those folks.
Right. So we were heartened to see that. We're trying to have the same sort of investment put into nursing home workers. As part of Reinvent Medicaid, there was a big cut to nursing homes. Unfortunately, it ended up being an across-the-board cut. Anytime there's an across-the-board cut, it tends to fall on the backs of the workers. So we really need to start, for the reasons I outlined earlier, we really need to start raising the wages for everyone, whether it's DD workers in DD, nursing homes, et cetera. In nursing homes, these are amazing people. They take care. They're around, excrement, loneliness, and death 24, all the time. When there's a snowstorm, they have to be there. So it's just not right that we continue to, that they continue to be the working poor in Rhode Island.
And the source of the funding for nursing homes, is it a mixture of federal and state dollars?
It's a mixture. It's primarily, most of the money in nursing homes is a mix between Medicaid and Medicare. And some of the nice nursing homes, you have private pay, and there's a little bit of, there's residents that also are part of the VA system. But I would say it's overwhelmingly Medicaid and Medicare dollars. So we should be using public money to invest in a living wage for the workforce, which in turn leads to higher quality for the residents, which is the most important mission of any nursing home.
Sure. I know it's early in the session, but you anticipate having both House and Senate bills on that issue this year?
Yeah, we've introduced a bill that posted Representative Slater, who's been a champion for us on some of our issues in the past, like childcare. We'll be putting in legislation similar to what we passed in 2001 as part of the budget, and what Massachusetts did last year. And we're waiting for it to post in the Senate. So, but we've asked Senator Golden to put that in, who's been a champion on this issues, and actually, when she was at the Women's Fund, did a lot of research about connecting long-term care to the fact that it's a women's issue, because 90% of the workforce is women, and 74%. Most of the residents are also women, so the quality care is really important to the residents as
Sure.
well. So she did a lot of research on that, that we continue to use today. So she understands the issue at her core.
So other than the Fight for 15 for that segment of the workforce, what other issues are on your agenda for this year?
We're gonna try to keep the money in for the those that take care of the adults with developmental disabilities. that is our priority for this year. And we'll end up having to defend ourselves from whatever shows up. But those are kind of the two areas that we're mostly focused on. We will take a look if May revenue is good, working with folks to increase parent eligibility in the state subsidized program for family child care providers who just signed a contract, their first contract last year. But we'll see what happens, and we'll be working on. Those will be our priorities. There'll be a bunch of other issues that we support, but that's where we'll put the core of our organizational strength into.
Sure. And I know the governor has just recently introduced her budget. Other than the money for the developmental disabilities, are there any other budget issues that you think you're going to have your organization focus on as this process moves forward?
We appreciate her raising the minimum wage, so that's something we support. There's probably
I don't think many of our viewers realize there's not only a separate bill for raising the minimum wage, but the governor actually included a minimum wage hike into her actual budget proposal.
In her budget, she that's 2 years in a row she did that. So she put it up to 1010. Again, it's important to raising the floor. The higher the floor, the easier it is to make it to 15 an hour. So those are the two things that really stand out in her budget as positives. Obviously a lot of our members work in urban areas, so the school funding formula has the potential to help out those families. But besides the minimum wage and the money for the adults with developmental disabilities, there's probably a few things, but those are the two that we're really happy were included in her budget.
Now, the legislative priority you've just outlined fits really well with your union's national campaign for the Fight for 15. What are you seeing elsewhere around the country in terms of this Fight for 15? Is there more excitement, enthusiasm, a sense that we can get this done than there was a couple of years ago when it first got off the ground? Yeah,
I think we're actually seeing the beginning of a growing movement in terms of Fight for 15 and a union. It started in November 2012 when about 100 workers in fast food walked off the job in New York City, demanding $15 in a union. And now it's grown. There's a bunch of cities, Los Angeles, Seattle, that have passed $15 minimum wage. California is going to have a referendum. New York's on the path through a wage board to probably getting to a $15 minimum wage. And a Republican governor in Massachusetts sat down with PCAs, home care workers, and they came up with a contract that's going to get them
PCAs, personal care
attendants, or assistants, and they are going to have a $15 minimum wage phased in by 2018, which I think puts pressure on Rhode Island to also raise our wages for long-term care workers. So to have a Republican governor sit with home care workers represented by another SEIU local shows that there's real momentum. And in California, it's going to be part of a statewide referendum effort this year. So, yeah, we've seen progress on it, and I think it's really growing. And SEIU locals and other unions have won $15 an hour and a bunch of at the negotiating table on dozens, probably even hundreds of contracts at this point in hospitals, health centers, nursing homes throughout the country. So we're trying to get some momentum. We're working with your organization on a $15 minimum wage for direct care staff that care for adults with developmental disabilities. So we think we're getting good momentum, and there's more and more workers joining. What started with fast food workers, there's adjuncts joining in, nursing home workers. So it's growing. It's on a good trajectory.
People would be shocked to learn how far we've fallen from what the value of the minimum wage was in the 60s compared to what it is today, because it just hasn't come close to keeping pace with inflation.
Right. Adjusted to inflation, our minimum wage should be $10.42 an hour, going back to 1968. If you actually account for productivity, the minimum wage, because productivity has gone up so much, the minimum wage should actually be $18 an hour, which is actually probably the living wage in Rhode Island. I remember last year the housing advocates echoed a big national study that said basically you needed about $18.50 to have affordable housing. You need to make $18.50 an hour. So 15 is a living wage in a lot of places. It might not even be in Rhode Island. So, but we thought it was a good place to. A good number. It's basically double the federal minimum wage, which is a complete joke at this point. Only 5 states still have the federal minimum wage, and they're last place in everything: childhood education, et cetera.
Right.
These are the solid South. So, yeah.
All right. Emmanuel Falck, thank you very much for coming to the studio and sharing your agenda with our viewers.
Great to be back, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision.
Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney. For more than 30 years, the Institute for Labor Studies and Research has been offering classes in English and math to people who attend a whole variety of our programs here at the Institute. And we all know how important solid skills in English and math are in terms of your ability to be functioning in society and ability to be able to grow and develop in the workforce. One of those areas that we rarely talk about is financial literacy. And we made a decision to focus on several sessions here where we talk about the importance of financial literacy and the impact it would have on you and your family and those around you in growing the kind of lifestyle that you hope to gain over a period of years. My guest today is Daniel Murphy, a Vice President, Home Loan Investment Bank. Daniel comes with a rich experience in financial literacy in the banking industry, and we're very appreciative for the fact that he would take time from his schedule to talk about the importance of financial literacy. Daniel, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
What about the philosophy that some people say you always pay yourself first, and when you get a paycheck, you take a little bit of money, and the same as you would pay a bill, you put it away and give it to somebody, or put it in an account to save it for a special day, to save it for savings that could be 20 years down the road. How important is it for people to get in the habit of putting that away?
It's funny you mention that. I still have the account that I opened at a very young age, and it has compounded interest for 38 years. The most important thing about that is to understand when you do pay yourself first, that is the reward. That is why we are able to go out and put in a solid day's work knowing what you're earning. But what you do with the money once you earn it, that's where financial literacy comes in. If you don't understand how to manage those monies, you invest it poorly. Sometimes if you're investing in yourself, well, that's a wise investment. If you're putting that money away, it's going to allow you the opportunity, whether it's for your own education or loved ones, purchase a vehicle or purchase a home. That money that is, again, compounding interest, so it is accruing every day that it's in the bank, it is accruing more and more interest for your benefit. Understanding the basic principles of banking will allow you to find the right accounts with the right bank that's going to give you the rewards necessary for you to save enough to make that big ticket purchase. Maybe it is a boat, a car, a house, or a wedding, or just, again, investing in yourself and continuing education like college or obtaining a master's degree. It really depends on each individual and what their personal goals are. And usually their personal goals will align with how they're spending. And when that person falls off that track, sometimes difficult to get back on track. Maybe a loved one asks for monies, and you understand that person's not really valuing your money. They want to borrow from a friend or a family member. You also have to realize, well, if I can afford to help that person, you also you hope that when you're in a position of need, that person will be able to help you. But that's why banks are there. Banks are there to help you, to understand your personal situation, to be able to provide you a loan. And that's where your personal credit, your personal income, and your personal circumstances become very important. The more you know, you can prepare yourself for those next opportunities to borrow and make those dream situations that you've been dreaming about a reality.
Let's say, for example, we've said it's important for you to know how much money you have in the bank all the time. It's important for you to know that when you're using a debit card, it's not a bottomless fund of money. It's your money. You need to know where it is. Now, something comes along and somebody determines it's important and they want to use their credit card. So they make a credit card purchase, but before they make that credit card purchase, I want you to talk about the importance of what's the process of getting a credit card. We have new people that come to this country every year with no credit history. We have university students who graduate who have no credit history. If people wanted to start a credit history to get a credit card, we hear things like secure credit cards, and most people wouldn't know what that is. Let's talk for a minute about building a credit history from a secure credit card to making sure you make manageable payments to getting it paid off, and then establishing a credit rating with a number.
Absolutely. So for any individual, regardless of the background, the moment you apply for credit, the information that they're requesting is very personal information, social security number. They're requesting information regarding your annual income. For some people, like you mentioned, a student, they might not have the benefit of having annual income. So the credit cards available to them may be limited. And if the person does not have credit, there is, let's just say it's difficult to assess the risk. And so credit card companies, when they are uncertain of risk, they are going to err on the side of caution, and they're going to charge a higher rate of interest to offset the risk of letting you borrow their money. So high risk individuals are typically those without a credit history, or they're those who have had credit but unfortunately abused it. They were not able to make payments on time. They took out monies that were actually in excess of the maximum amount they were allowed. And similar to the situation you mentioned before about balancing a checkbook, someone does have the ability to overdraft. They can take out more monies than they actually have available to them, and they incur a penalty. Well, credit cards operate very similarly in that they do charge you interest. They also have fees, service fees, annual fees, and late fees. So if you're not really paying attention, you could accumulate substantial fees just for making that one-time purchase. It may be that you moved your residence, in that you moved from one apartment to another. That mail for that invoice did not arrive on an on-time basis, and that payment arrived late. That 30-day late payment is going to stay on your credit profile for a period of maybe 7 to 10 years until that history has been essentially purged. So the most important thing for someone to do when they're considering applying for a credit card is to know their personal situation, understand what they can afford, realize that the purpose of this credit card is to offset the amount of cash they have in their pocket. Typically, credit cards are used for items that which you cannot afford at that moment. So credit card companies are preying on someone to have the lack of discipline to make those purchases. They want you to exceed the limit that they gave you because there are incentives for them to do so, which are, as a consumer, these are our disincentives. These are the fees and these are the rates of interest at which we're paying back those credit card companies, which maybe exceed the rates that we would want to pay, but due to a lack of credit history, we didn't have as many options. And so some people, out of desperation, will accept those terms and conditions, and they subject themselves to increased fees, which then lowers their available income or disposable income for fixed expenses, variable expenses, and now you throw that credit card on top. That's clearly a variable expense because that rate of interest, the amount of purchases, these are things which are determined throughout the course of that month, which are not predetermined. So it's not debt that is a fixed amount each and every month, unless you make it such where you budget for X amount of dollars on your credit card each and every month to chip away more aggressively at that principal and balance.
If we had to put in a nutshell the things that we thought were important for people to know in this first session, it would appear to me that we're saying understand that the money in your account, whether you access it by check or debit card, is a limited amount.
Absolutely.
And the second you overdraft on it, you are now giving the bank money that you don't have, and you're waiting for your next paycheck to come in. Second thing would appear to be that if you want to start a credit card, you should really have one that's secured, which means you have the money for it, and make sure you make the payment on time, because when you talked about late fees and over limit fees or whatever they may be, right, you are now probably building more in fees than your payment would have been.
That's absolutely correct. And that is so dangerous because it's the fine print. It is typically the document that you elected not to read, which discloses all the penalties, all the fees that you're going to be exposed to in the case, or what they consider a worst case scenario, but it's a reality. Most people do not anticipate the circumstances that cause them to overdraft from their personal checking or savings account, or utilize a credit card beyond its limit. Those are situations where they may be, again, it could be a life-altering situation that they were forced to do so. Maybe that they needed to replace those tires to make sure that their car is functioning to get to their job. And so the next paycheck they receive, you're right, it is being dedicated to some other purpose. It's not their goal, but inevitably, if we are able to teach our audience the tools and skills necessary to understand what they're signing before they sign, recognize that if you prepare yourself to apply for an auto loan, a home mortgage, or a credit card, you're going to gather your personal documentation. Maybe it's your last year's W-2 or 1040, your most recent pay stub, to look at what you're actually earning, to understand the difference between gross and net and what my take-home pay is after taxes, to understand now I can pay these fixed and variable expenses that are associated with my living. And if it takes X amount of dollars to pay that each and every month, you want to make sure you have the income coming in to be able to afford the money that is going out. And if you do not, it's a good time to pump the brakes. And again, that exercise of writing down the days of the week and the expenses that you have incurred, what you purchased, and really you ought to explain to yourself why. Why did I make these purchases? Because a lot of times you may find that you're making purchases and making very impractical decisions that, again, they weren't predetermined. You didn't go to the grocery market intending to spend $280. You only went in there to buy specific items. So that type of overspending, you're going to have to budget for that. You're going to have to go back home and look at the balance in your account to make sure, did I make a mistake? Because you're not going to want to repeat that mistake time and time again.
Well, thanks, Dan. I think that each of these modules will be beneficial for people to take a look at and see how it applies to themselves, a family member, and in many ways teaching young children the value of money, the importance of saving and balancing account. I look forward to our next conversations, where I think we'll probably have a conversation about payday loans,
okay,
and the issue of what the credit numbers really mean.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this segment on financial literacy. We look forward to having conversations with you in the next show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.